Before you hear what I'm about to tell you, I want you to sit with something for a moment. We spend our whole lives learning to spot the wrong kind of people. The ones who take without asking. The ones who lie to your face. But nobody ever warns you about the ones who love you first. Or at least make you believe they do, and then use that love like a master key to every door you've ever locked. Ask yourself this before we go any further. If someone you trusted handed you something ordinary, something thoughtful, something wrapped up in care, how long would it take you to question it? My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old, retired after 31 years with the City of Columbus Public Works Department, and last spring I sat across a conference table from my stepson, while a fraud investigator slid a printed email toward him with 2 fingers, like she was handling something she didn't want to touch. The email was his. The words were his, and every single person in that room read them at the same time. I need to go back about 4 months to explain how we got there. I retired in February. 31 years of managing storm drain systems, road crews, asphalt contracts, and city inspections will tire a man down to the bone. And when my doctor started circling words like blood pressure and sustained stress, I decided it was time. I'd earned it. My wife, Carolyn, had been telling me for 2 years to hang it up, so I did. The retirement party was a Thursday afternoon in the break room at the Morse Road facility. Someone ordered a tray of sandwiches from Subway. My supervisor gave a speech that was mostly about himself. They got me a card and a gift card to Home Depot, which I actually appreciated. I'm not a sentimental man. Practical suits me fine. What I didn't expect was the package waiting on my porch when I got home that evening. It was from my stepson, Darnell, Carolyn's son from her first marriage. He's 34, works in finance, or says he does, something about investment consulting that I never fully understood because whenever I asked him to explain it, he'd use words that seemed designed not to be understood. We'd been civil for 11 years, not warm, not cold, civil. He remembered my birthday most years. We watched football sometimes. It was fine. The package was wrapped in dark blue paper with a white ribbon. Inside was a smartwatch. Not a cheap one either, the kind with the health monitoring features, the ones that track your heart rate and your sleep and your steps. There was a card. It said, "Enjoy your freedom, Gerald. You've earned it. Darnell." Carolyn was in the kitchen when I brought it in. She lit up when she saw it. "He didn't tell me he was doing that," she said. And she meant it, I could tell. She was genuinely touched. So was I, honestly. 11 years and he'd never done anything like this. I put the watch on that same night. I wore it for 3 weeks straight, walking the neighborhood after dinner, driving to appointments, sitting on the back porch drinking coffee and talking to my old buddy Vincent on the phone about whether we should take a fishing trip up to Lake Erie before summer hit. I wore it everywhere. That's important. I wore it everywhere. That's important. I wore it everywhere. Vincent and I go back 40 years. We met at a job site in 1984 when we were both young and stupid and thought manual labor was temporary. He retired from the county roads department 2 years before me. We talk 3-4 times a week, and we talk about everything. His health, my health, the pension, what's left in savings, whether either of us would ever sell our houses and downsize. My house on Blenheim Road has been paid off for 6 years. It's worth somewhere around $310,000 now, which still surprises me every time I think about it. I bought it in 1997 for $112. I have a life insurance policy, a 401k, that I rolled into an IRA when I retired, and a pension from the city that pays me a fixed amount every month like clockwork. I told Vincent all of this, not in one conversation, but over weeks, in the way that you talk to a close friend when you're both figuring out what the next chapter looks like. I never thought once about who else might be listening. The thing that changed everything was a Wednesday morning in March. I was getting a physical at my doctor's office, just the regular annual thing, and I ran into an old coworker from Public Works in the waiting room. His name is Stanley. Stanley spent 22 years as a city infrastructure technician, and before that he did 2 tours in the Army working in signals intelligence. He's the kind of quiet that makes you feel like he's always reading something you didn't write yet. We hadn't seen each other in about 4 months. He spotted the watch first before he even said hello. "Gerald," he said, nodding at my wrist. "Where'd you get that?" I told him Darnell gave it to me for retirement. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at it, turned his coffee cup in his hands. Then he said very calm, "Can I take a look at it later? I don't want to make something out of nothing, but there's a thing I want to check." I laughed a little. Told him sure. We sat there and caught up about retirement and his granddaughter's school play and the road construction tearing up Sinclair Road. And the whole time I noticed he kept looking at the watch the way a mechanic looks at a car that sounds like it's running fine but isn't. He came over the next afternoon. Carolyn was at her sister's. Stanley sat at my kitchen table with the watch and the small device I didn't recognize. He called it a Bluetooth scanner, something he'd kept from his army days. He spent maybe 20 minutes on it. He didn't say much. When he was done, he set the watch down on the table, flat like evidence. "This has a secondary pairing," he said. "There's a voice pickup function active on it. Not factory. Someone modified the companion app. It's been transmitting audio." I stared at him. "Transmitting to what?" "Another device. Somewhere. I can't tell you where from here. But this thing has been listening, Gerald." I picked up my coffee mug, set it back down without drinking. I thought about every phone call with Vincent. I thought about the back porch. I thought about 3 weeks of my retired life, the most open and honest I'd been with anyone in years. All of it potentially sent somewhere. "Are you sure?" I asked. Stanley looked at me with the kind of patience that comes from spending years making sure before saying anything. "I'm sure," he said. "I didn't call Darnell. I didn't call Carolyn. I drove to the Columbus Police Division's non-emergency office the next morning with the watch in a Ziploc bag, feeling slightly ridiculous and very cold inside. The officer who took the report, a detective named Phelps, was thorough. Younger than I expected. He had the kind of face that doesn't react, just absorbs. He took the watch to their tech person, a woman named Rosa, who came back 20 minutes later with a look on her face that told me what she was going to say before she said it. "This app has been modified to run a background audio capture," Rosa said. "It syncs over Bluetooth to a secondary account. Someone with access to that account could receive streamed audio when the watch is within range of a paired phone. So everything I said near my phone could have been heard, yes, in real time or recorded, depending on the setup." I sat in that plastic chair for a moment, feeling like the ground had shifted 2 inches to the left. What would someone want from listening to a retired 63-year-old man? I asked, mostly to myself. Phelps answered anyway. Routines, financial conversations, health information, anything that could be used to establish a pattern of... He paused, choosing the word carefully, diminished capacity. I looked at him. "Someone could use this to build a case," he continued, "that you need assistance managing your affairs." I didn't say anything else for a long time. On the drive back to Blenheim Road, I thought about a conversation I'd had on the porch 2 weeks prior. I'd told Vincent that I'd been getting headaches when I stood up too fast. That sometimes I misplaced things. Normal retirement age stuff, the kind you joke about. But I'd said it out loud near my phone, wearing the watch. I thought about how those words would sound, clipped and arranged differently to someone building a story. Detective Phelps told me not to confront anyone. "Act normal," he said. "Let people show you where this is going." I drove home and put the watch back on. That's the part I still think about. Not that I wore it again, but that some part of me wanted to know how far this went. When you spent 30 years fixing systems, you don't just shut things down, you run diagnostics first. For the next week, I was careful. I talked on the back porch the way I always did. But now I chose what I said. Near the watch, I mentioned that I was thinking about finally setting up a formal estate plan, that I'd been meaning to talk to a financial advisor about consolidating my accounts, that I was maybe getting too old to manage it all myself. Every sentence tasted like rust in my mouth. 4 days after I started feeding the line, Darnell called. He never called on a Wednesday. He said he was just checking in, wanted to see how retirement was treating me. Had I thought about what I was going to do with the house long term? He'd actually been doing some research, and there were some really smart options for people in my position. You know, property rich but wanting to simplify. He used the phrase simplify your life 3 times in 10 minutes. I said I was still figuring things out. He said he could come by that weekend if I wanted to talk through some ideas. I said sure. I called Detective Phelps that afternoon and told him about the conversation. He asked if Darnell had ever had any formal access to my financial accounts. I said no. He asked if I'd ever signed anything giving Darnell any authority over anything. I said no. He said good. And then he said, keep your eyes open for paper. I started looking. Carolyn keeps her files in a cabinet in the bedroom closet. Insurance documents, tax returns, the deed to the house, that kind of thing. She's organized in a way I've always admired. I went through it on a Saturday afternoon when she was at the grocery store, feeling like I was doing something wrong in my own home. At the back of the third drawer, behind a folder of medical explanation of benefits forms, I found something that didn't belong. A manila folder, newer than everything else. Inside were printed documents. Legal templates. I could tell they were templates because some of the fields still had placeholder brackets, the kind a lawyer fills in before finalizing. But there was handwriting in the margins. Darnell's small, neat print. The documents were a durable power of attorney template, a financial management authorization form, and something called a voluntary conservatorship petition. The handwriting in the margins said things like, confirmed physician, get signed before IRA rollover, call title co-re, property. I sat down on the edge of the bed and held those papers for a long time. I wasn't angry yet. Anger came later. What I felt first was something I can only describe as vertigo. Like the room had just quietly rearranged itself while I was looking away. I'd spent 31 years keeping the city's infrastructure running. I'd managed million-dollar contracts, union grievances, emergency flood responses at 2 a.m. in January. No one in 31 years had ever once questioned whether I was capable. And now my stepson of 11 years had a folder in my own house with notes about confirming my physician and getting documents signed before I could access my own retirement money. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. That evening, when Carolyn came home, I watched her move around the kitchen. The way she put groceries away, paused to read a coupon before tossing it. She was humming something I didn't recognize. I almost told her. The words were right there, but I thought about how she'd looked when she saw that watch, genuinely surprised, genuinely touched, and I decided to wait. What I did instead was call Stanley. Stanley came over the next morning. I showed him the folder. He didn't react the way most people would. No sharp intake of breath, no, oh my God. He just looked at it, then looked at me. You need to document this, he said. Not just remember it, document it. He helped me photograph every page of every document with my phone, front and back. He helped me write out a timeline, handwritten, of every relevant conversation and event, starting from the day I received the watch. He told me something I've repeated to myself every day since. Paper keeps you from disappearing. He said that older men, especially retired men without obvious institutional affiliations, can get dismissed very quickly when disputes involve family. Put things in writing, he said. Date everything. Get your own paper in place before theirs is finished. I went to my own attorney the next day, a woman named Patricia Chen who I'd used for my will 7 years ago. I explained everything. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it should be. At the end, she said 2 things. First, don't sign anything from anyone for any reason until she reviewed it. Second, update your existing documents now before anyone files anything. We spent 90 minutes updating my durable power of attorney, assigning it to my nephew Kendall, who lives in Cincinnati and has no financial stake in anything I own, and reviewing my beneficiary designations across every account. Walking out of Patricia's office, I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like the feeling when you've finally tightened a bolt that's been rattling for weeks. Things were still broken, but they'd stopped moving. Darnell came by that Saturday as planned. Carolyn made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. He had a laptop and what looked like a professionally printed presentation, not a lot of pages, but glossy, real. He talked about estate planning options, about trusts, about the benefits of having a trusted family member take a more active role in managing assets during retirement. He used the word protection constantly. He used the phrase peace of mind 4 times. He did not once use the word control. The watch was on my wrist the whole time. I asked calm questions. I nodded in what I hoped were the right places. At one point, he slid a document across the table, a financial power of attorney, pre-filled with my name, and said that signing it was just the first step, nothing binding in the full sense. I picked up the document and read it slowly. Then I set it down. "Let me have my attorney look at it first," I said. "Patricia Chen, I've used her for years." Something shifted behind his eyes. "Just a fraction." "Of course," he said. "Absolutely, that makes total sense." He left an hour later. At the door, he hugged Carolyn and told her she looked great. He shook my hand and said he was glad we were on the same page. I watched him back out of the driveway. Then I went inside and called Detective Phelps. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept playing the role Darnell expected. I mentioned to Carolyn that I'd been feeling more tired than usual. I talked, near the watch, about getting overwhelmed by the paperwork of retirement. I let things go quiet in a way that I thought might read as confusion to someone listening. I hated all of it. Every word felt like a small betrayal of myself. But every time I wavered, I thought about that folder in the closet, about the phrase "get signed before IRA rollover," about how close I'd come to being handed a document and trusting it because it came from a family member who'd just given me a birthday gift. The email came on a Tuesday. Darnell sent it to a third party I didn't recognize, a name I later learned was an estate attorney he'd been consulting. My attorney, Patricia, flagged it because Darnell had CC'd an address that, through a chain of connections I won't pretend to fully understand, came back to a contact list associated with my own financial accounts. The email was about timing. It referenced me by name. It said that I had been showing increasing difficulty with financial decisions. It said that the voluntary pathway was the most efficient route. It ended with a line that made Patricia go very quiet when she read it to me over the phone. The line said, "Once the power is in place, the property piece becomes straightforward. He trusts me. That's the window." Patricia filed a complaint with the Franklin County Probate Court that afternoon. She also contacted my bank's fraud prevention department directly. 2 days later, we were in a conference room at the bank. It was a small room. Round table, not long, a carafe of water, nobody touched. Darnell came in wearing a jacket and tie, which he almost never does. He smiled at me when he came in, not a warm smile. A managing smile, the kind you use when you think you're still in charge of the situation. Carolyn sat beside me. She found out the night before when I finally told her everything. She'd been very still while I talked. She didn't cry until I read her the email. Then she cried quietly in a way that seemed more like grief than surprise. The bank's fraud investigator, a woman named Teresa, ran the meeting. Patricia sat beside me. Detective Phelps was there too, in the back corner, not saying much. Teresa started by confirming facts with Darnell. Had he initiated a call to my financial advisor's office representing himself as my authorized agent? Yes, but only to ask general questions. Had he prepared legal documents intended for my signature without my prior knowledge? He'd been trying to help. It was a gesture. Had he communicated to a third-party attorney that I was experiencing cognitive decline? He'd expressed concern. That's what family does. Teresa slid the email across the table. She let him read it. Darnell's jaw tightened. He said it was taken out of context. He said he was trying to protect the family's assets. He looked at Carolyn and said, "Mom, you know this wasn't," Carolyn said, very quietly. "Don't." That one word did more than anything else in that room. Teresa continued. She explained that accessing someone's financial information under false pretenses and preparing legal instruments to assume control of another person's assets without their knowledge or consent was a matter the bank was referring to the appropriate authorities. She explained that any further attempt to represent himself in connection with my accounts would be treated as fraud. Phelps stood up and asked Darnell to come with him. There were no handcuffs. It wasn't dramatic. He stood up from the table, straightened his jacket, and walked out without looking at either of us. The room was very quiet after that. Teresa gathered her papers. Patricia touched my arm briefly. I stared at the water carafe for a moment, thinking about nothing in particular, and then about everything at once. I took the smartwatch off my wrist and set it on the table. It sat there looking expensive and harmless and completely ordinary. "Good health monitor," I said to no one. "Terrible gift." Patricia almost smiled. Outside, it was one of those gray March days that can't decide whether it wants to rain. Carolyn and I walked to the car without talking. She got in the passenger side, which she never does. I'm always the passenger. She just sat there. I started the engine. Didn't pull out yet. "I should have told you sooner," I said. She looked straight ahead. "I should have seen it." We sat there for a while, the heater running, watching people walk in and out of the bank. After a few minutes, she reached over and put her hand on mine. We didn't say anything else. That was enough. The weeks that followed were the kind of quiet that takes getting used to. Carolyn and Darnell didn't speak for a long time. She didn't tell me what they eventually said to each other. I didn't ask. There are things a marriage has to work through in private, and that was one of them. I updated every account, every password, every document. Patricia walked me through setting up a revocable living trust, which took 3 appointments and made me feel more like an institution than a person, but in a good way. Stanley came over for coffee one afternoon, and I told him everything that had happened. He just nodded, the way he does, and said, "Good, you didn't disappear." That phrase has stayed with me. The investigation into Darnell is still ongoing as far as I know. I was told not to expect a quick resolution, and I don't. These things move slowly when they involve paperwork and intent, and no money actually changed hands yet. That last part is the one that burns a little. No money changed hands yet. It was all so close. I went back to my regular life. Walks after dinner. Coffee on the porch. Calls with Vincent on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Gerald, I've known you 40 years, and I never once thought you'd be somebody who needed protecting." He paused. "I'm glad you protected yourself. I wear a regular watch now. The old kind, the kind with a winding stem that you have to set manually every few days. Carolyn gave it to me for our anniversary 6 years ago. It doesn't track my sleep or count my steps or connect to anything. It just tells me what time it is. Honestly, that's all I need it to do." I think about how easy it would have been to sign that document. One signature on a Saturday morning at my own kitchen table with coffee and a glossy presentation and a person I'd called family for 11 years. That's all it would have taken. I would have handed over the ability to speak for myself, to manage what I'd spent a lifetime building, to make my own decisions, not in a moment of confusion, but in a moment of trust. That's the part I keep turning over. Not the betrayal. The trust. How completely ordinary it looked. If you're listening to this and you're 60 or 70 or anywhere close, I want to say something directly. You are not obligated to explain yourself to prove that your mind works. You are not selfish for wanting to manage your own affairs. You are not stubborn for reading something carefully before you sign it. Asking questions is not rude. Taking your time is not weakness. And if someone tells you that the goal is to simplify your life, find out who benefits from that simplicity before you agree to anything. The ones who want to help you are patient. They explain things. They don't set deadlines. They don't use phrases like, "before the account rolls over." They don't disappear the moment you say the words, "let my attorney take a look." Trust is not naive, but it's worth protecting. Yours and the people who actually deserve it. Update your documents now, while you're calm and clear and nobody's pushing. Tell someone you trust, not someone who tells you to trust them. Know what you have and who gets it and why, because the quiet kind of danger doesn't announce itself. It shows up with a nice card and something that looks like a gift and says, "Happy retirement, I've been thinking about you." Thank you for being here. If any part of this story felt familiar, if something in it reminded you of yourself or someone you love, please share it. These situations don't survive the light. And if you have your own story, leave it in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Uncle Frederick, and I'll see you next time. I've been sitting with this for a while now, trying to figure out what I actually want to say. Not what sounds right, but what's true. What happened to me wasn't random. That's the part I keep coming back to. Darnell didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a different person. He made small choices, one after another, each one building on the last. A gift chosen carefully, an app modified quietly, a folder hidden in the back of someone else's closet, a phrase in an email. He trusts me. That's the window. Written by a man who had spent years learning exactly how I operated, because that's what proximity gives you. Not love. Information. And I made choices too. That's the honest part. I wore that watch for 3 weeks without a second thought because I wanted to believe that 11 years of civility had finally turned into something warmer. I wanted the gift to mean what it looked like it meant. That wanting, that very human, very reasonable wanting is what created the opening. Not stupidity. Not weakness. Just the ordinary hope that people close to you are who they seem to be. What pulled me through wasn't anything dramatic. It was Stanley asking a quiet question in a waiting room. It was Patricia Chen listening without interrupting for 40 minutes. It was me writing things down in ink on paper, dated in my own handwriting, because Stanley told me that paper keeps you from disappearing. Every one of those moments was a choice, too. Small, unglamorous, a little uncomfortable. But they added up the same way Darnell's choices added up, just in the opposite direction. That's the thing about cause and effect that nobody really teaches you. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. What you do when nobody's watching. What you decide when it would be easier to let it go. Who you call when you're sitting in a parking lot, not sure you can trust your own judgment. Those things build a structure underneath you, one you don't even notice until you actually need it to hold. Darnell had intelligence. He understood paperwork and timing and how to move carefully. But he made the mistake of thinking that intelligence without integrity is a strategy. It isn't. It's just a longer path to the same collapse. The email that ended everything, once the POA is in place, the property piece becomes straightforward, wasn't a slip. It was the natural result of a person who had spent so long thinking about what he could take that he stopped being careful about what he revealed. Corners cut quietly still show up eventually. What I want for anyone listening is not to live afraid. I'm not. I go on my walks. I call Vincent on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I drink my coffee on the porch and I don't flinch every time someone gives me something. But I pay attention now in a way I didn't before. Not with suspicion, with clarity. There's a difference. Suspicion is exhausting and it poisons everything. Clarity just means you ask questions. You read before you sign. You update your documents before someone else decides they need to. You know who speaks for you if you can't speak for yourself. And you chose that person, not whoever showed up with a presentation and a smile. Integrity isn't a value you hold when it's convenient. It's the thing you build when nothing is happening, so it's already there when something is. Gerald had 31 years of showing up and doing the work and not cutting corners on city infrastructure because people's safety depended on it. That wasn't separate from what happened in that conference room. It was the same thing, just in a different room. The man who fixed what was broken for 3 decades didn't disappear when someone tried to write him out of his own life. He just applied what he already knew. Pay attention. Take notes. Ask questions. Choose your people carefully and trust them completely. The rest takes care of itself.